Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ramiro from Anticonquista. Anticonquista is an anti-imperialist media collective. Our content is produced by and for the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. And welcome to our third anniversary for Anticonquista. Shout out to all the co-editors out here. We got a great squad of people, the people who make it happen on a day-by-day basis. I got myself, Ramiro, Ofelia, my partner, my girlfriend, who we're out here in LA. We got Comrade Carlos out in London. We got Comrade Rich out in Cali. Comrade Nick as well, who's out in Cali as well. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're gonna let a few more people jump in, but please make sure to share this link, share this on your Facebook, your YouTube, your MySpace, whatever the fuck you have. You know, get the word out. Today is a day of celebration, a day of coming together with our people to talk with our people about our achievements as a Latin American and Caribbean communist revolutionary collective. Shout out to Leon Friedrich desde Chicago. Shout out to Ibrahim. And shout out to everybody who's watching. Again, make sure to share this. We are celebrating the third anniversary of Anticonquista. We were founded 3 years ago, October 12th, 2017 in Quito, Ecuador. We'll go into a little bit about why we started and the reasons for why we started. But I just want to give a shout out. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the other comrades here, starting with Ofelia. And the comrades who are on right now, shout out to Luca, by the way. Tell us your name and a little bit about yourself and share with our people like why you got involved with Anticonquista, starting with Ofelia.
Hey everyone, what's up? This is Ofelia. I think a long time ago, this was almost 5 years ago when Ramiro and I started dating. He had this idea to create this project, right? Originally as a party, and things have changed since then, but it was always like, oh, let's figure out when's the right moment. When should we do it? We need to have a good amount of people. And while we were Carlos and ourselves were like working at Telesur English down in Ecuador, we had a lot of frustrations with just the way the project was being run. And we were like, well, then let's do our own thing. Like, why are we waiting? It's never going to be a perfect moment. It's never going to be perfect branding. You know, you'll develop that also. The practice comes, right? Like as you're actually doing the work. And so we just decided alongside like our full-time jobs to start Anticonquista. And that's eventually how we met Nick. That's eventually how Rich came in as well. Like as we started putting stuff up, we put up the website, we started creating content for social media. Like that's kind of how Anticonquista just came to be. We were very frustrated, especially with liberal media. You know, the mitos, remezclas, that was one of our first articles. Yeah, if y'all remember, and it's still one of our most popular on our site. Kind of just exposing those sites for like the old lies they continue to repackage in new ways. And that was really why I got involved personally. I remember just being on Instagram and being like, why do people keep believing remezcla or fusion or Me Too? Why isn't there like a solid, like leftist, energetic kind of platform to share anti-imperialist and also socialist views, right? Like about our homeland. And when Ramiro was like, well, I've been having this idea, and just like in conversations, you know, and I was like, well, let's just do it. We have the skills. And as we continue to build the platform. And for myself personally, like, I was born and raised in East LA, like daughter of like Mexican campesinos, of a single mother, like socialism kind of came just naturally, literally, as I was reading history and reading Wikipedia. And, you know, I was like, if our people keep doing this continuously in history, time and time again, and the US hates it, there must be something good about it. So that's kind of how I got involved. Yeah.
So Carlos, why don't you tell us a little bit about tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, your background, your political views, and why you think Anticonquista is important.
Hey comrades, happy birthday to Anticonquista. And yeah, I'm Carlos. Like Ofelia and Ramiro said, we met in Quito, Ecuador when we were working for Telesur English. I wanted to get involved in the project. I remember one evening, Ramiro and Ofelia invited us over to their apartment, and they were like, you know, we have this idea about an alternative media collective for communist and socialist Latin Americans in the diaspora, and I thought, you know, there was nothing like it back then, and I don't think there's anything like it now apart from us. Although there are a few other groups that are starting to spring up, I think, as well. And I think it's important because, like Ophelia and Ramiro already said, Telesur English and Telesur in general is an awesome news outlet for kind of people that don't know what's going on in Latin America. But I think we have to move beyond that, because it's, you know, especially Telesur English, where we were working, trying to kind of replicate the liberal kind of model of just reporting objective, neutral news when we understand that, you know, what we want to report isn't neutral. We have a political stance. We're communist. We want to report on the situation, on a war that is being waged on our people. So that's why Anticonquista was important to me, and that's why it's important for us to you know, carry on working to make sure that Anticonquista continues, and that it becomes stronger, and that people see it as kind of the radical communist socialist outlet that has a voice for our people, and not just, you know, trying to be liberal and trying to you know, build another The Guardian or Washington Post or that kind of bullshit. Yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up. And Comrade Nick, what's up, Nick? Tell us a little bit about who you are. People, our viewers and listeners have seen you in a few episodes on our podcast and stuff like that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, you know, like who you are and why you're involved with Anticonquista?
So my name is Nick. I'm Puerto Rican Dominican. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey, born and raised, and then I came out here to California, and I'm planning to actually go back to New Jersey soon. But yeah, I think one of the things that got me most involved in Anticonquista was since I was really young, I was raised in a very progressive, very left household. So I was reading Marx. You know, I started reading Marx around 13, and then you know, around 2016, I was really involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, and I was big into politics, but liberal politics, you know, progressive politics. I was a big Bernie Sanders supporter. From there, though, after the loss of the 2016 election, after I saw kind of the sellout that Bernie was, especially when it came to him campaigning for Hillary or whatever, and the fact that imperialism was never talked about, actually, I kind of started looking for alternatives to the Democrats, alternatives to the political parties that exist here. And I think eventually what ended up happening was I found an article by Anticonquista on some website. I forget which one, but I read it and I went to the Anticonquista website. I saw what the org was all about. And I thought, this is pretty dope. And I think I could fit right in and I could contribute. So, you know, I reached out, and it's where we've been.
That's what's up. And by the way, 13 is fucking. I was doing dumb shit when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
I was just breaking shit, and that's what's up. That you're reading Marx at 13. Comrade Rich, shout out to Comrade Rich. Our beautiful website. If you go to anticonquista.com right now, Rich was the comrade who designed that. So shout out to Comrade Rich, and he's done a lot of great work for Anticonquista. Rich, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think Anticonquista is important and how you got involved?
Yeah, so my name is Rich Piedrahita. I was born and raised in New York, Colombian parents. And I just always been interested in socialism, communism. And, you know, when I was in college, I mostly saw white organizations. So I really wasn't interested in joining white organizations. And later on, as I got more educated on the subject, I started organizing with Black organizations, because I thought there really wasn't anything out there for Latinos that I was aware of, right? And and I started seeing content that you guys were publishing. So, I wasn't one of the founders. You guys had already baked the cake. All I did was blow out the candles, basically. So, so I think it's really important to have our own contending media. An alternative to this liberal media. Latino, just because it's Latino doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
Something that speaks to our class.
Exactly.
And so that's as soon as I saw that you guys had a call or something, and I was like, wow, you could join. I got to join this. I think I reached out to Carlos, and I said, yo, how can I get down? I love what you guys are doing. And I think at the time it was a party. And later, we became a media collective, but I was just looking to contribute because it spoke to me and I just wanted to be a part of it. I thought it was real important work that you guys were doing.
For sure. That's what's up, Rich. And shout out again to everybody who's on here. Shout out to Kayla, I saw her in the chat earlier. Shout out to Anthony Reyes. Shout out to Leon Friedrich. Univision is trash. Indeed, that shit is trash. That shit is poison. That shit controls the way our people view themselves, and it's poison. And that's why we decided to create Anticonquista with zero corporate funds, zero white liberals, deciding what we can and cannot say. And you just heard from all the great comrades here who make it possible. Before we move on, I do want to say, if you have any questions, again, this is a Q&A. So if you have any questions about Anticonquista or just about politics in general, history, anything you want to ask us, go ahead and ask us. Obviously, we will have some restrictions. If you're asking us like personal shit, like what's my social security number or where I work, I'm not going to tell y'all because, it's the internet. Anybody can use it in any way. But feel free to ask us questions. Anthony Reyes said Univision is definitely trash. They hate the darker skin, Hispanic, Latino. Yeah, that's definitely true. Before we go on to the Q&A part, I'm going to pass it over to Ophelia, who has an exciting giveaway thing that we're doing for the stream.
So a lot of what we have done, and also one of our principles is none of us are paid. I think we've said that enough times, but we all got jobs. Like we all, sustain ourselves in other ways outside of Anticonquista. So everything we do is on our free time, and the way we maintain the website is through your contributions on Patreon, or, through your purchases in our shop, which shout out to Rich, who also set that up for us, and what we wanted to do to commemorate, our third year, and to commemorate, I think we got to like 10,000 something. Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm. We got to 20,000 on Instagram, I think.
Oh, damn. I don't pay attention. So we got to 20,000 followers on Instagram also, which is huge. When we first started, there were other platforms about Latin America being run by white people. We won't say who they are, but that we were like, damn, how do they have so many followers? That's crazy. But anyway, we're getting there, and that's thanks to all of y'all. So what we're doing is we're going to do a little giveaway, but you got to make sure you're a Patreon. Even if you're only giving $1, get on Patreon, subscribe, be a contributor. And at the end of the month, at the end of the month, we're going to have a little raffle. We're going to be giving away a sweet copy of the Green Book that was republished by a good comrade of ours, Caleb Maupin, and Ramiro did the design and layout of the book. Caleb did the introduction. So we'll be giving out a couple of these, and then we'll also be some collection of our stickers, patches, which y'all might have seen already on our shop. These were all designed and produced by Rich. So, calladito, but he be doing mad stuff, designing, laying out the website, creating wonderful graphics and wonderful merch as well for y'all to enjoy. So make sure you share also share this live, tell all your friends who are followers on AC, like, hey, contribute $1 on the Patreon right now. You're going to be entered into this raffle for a couple of the Green Books and some of our cool patches. Yeah. And then we want to say also, because we know we have a lot of folks out in the UK, like Carlos will be sending out, he flashed them right now, some patches. So for the US, you'll be getting some of these, if you're on Patreon. And then in the UK, we'll be sending out some dope patches with Lolita Lebron, Mariátegui, and our logo, which is like a etch out of Nuestra America. Yeah.
One thing I want to mention that I particularly like this design that Rich made that says Operaciones Especiales, right? And the other one says Fuerzas Mediáticas. And I think it's such a beautiful slogan because it alludes to the fact that as communists in the diaspora, in the first world, you know, Carlos is out in the UK, the rest of us are in the US. We're not going to go pick up an AK and run to Times Square and start a revolution. You know, as many other groups, they're still operating as if it's the 50s and 60s. And like, they're trying to, you know, our role in the diaspora and the belly of the beast is so different from communists in back home in our motherland in the global south. And what I like about that Fuerzas Mediáticas, we're kind of like a digital army. We're like a digital electronic army that we're combating imperialist propaganda. We're combating the news, the fake news about Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua and about different resistance movements. And so I think it's beautiful, and you can be part of that too. You know, submit content, and you're helping out this war, because the war against imperialism isn't just economic and political. It's also mental, it's ideological, it's the media, the images that we get, how we dress, you know, what we appreciate. And so I just want to kind of put that out there to everybody. Before we move on to the Q&A, I just want to show y'all the first video that we ever published as Anticonquista. It's on our YouTube channel now. Shout out to compañera Yanai who did the video for us, just kind of laying out what we're about, what we stand for. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. Again, this is a video from 3 years ago when we first launched.
Hi, welcome to Anticonquista. We're a collective of young Latinx dedicated to the exposure and resistance to imperialism in Latin America and the Caribbean. On our site, we aim to provide analysis of history and current events in the region from an anti-imperialist, communist, third worldist, and pan-Latin American perspective. In other words, from a perspective which you don't hear from the mainstream media. We will be producing articles, videos, and books about the crimes committed by imperialist governments and the colonial elite on our land. We will also be creating content highlighting how leftist governments and revolutionary movements in the region resist their crimes. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we will engage in hands-on political work that seeks to overturn the capitalist imperialist system. Please feel free to submit your material. We welcome any contribution that helps expose their crimes and highlight our resistance.
I could watch that on repeat. That getting knocked out in Havana. But yo, that's what we're about. To all the comrades listening and watching, you know, and that's what we've done in the past 3 years. You know, we've not only produced media and content, but we're putting the value, because all of us create value, you know, from the articles, videos, everything that we produce. That value is going back to our people. We're funding resistance movements all over the continent. So far, we've sent money to groups in Haiti, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Chile, and we're also about to send some funds to Honduras. We're going to have more info about that soon. And so, yeah, I just wanted to ask you, all the comrades here, starting with Ofelia, what do you think, aside from what does Anticonquista mean to you, why is it important that more Latinos and communists should learn about Anticonquista in terms of like our perspective?
We have a lot to say. I think that's something that took me a long time to learn. Another illuminating experience being around white people in a newsroom talking about Latin America was that I was able to sit there and reflect. And, you know, as a woman, like, you often have like a lot of insecurity, a lot of self-doubt, imposter syndrome. So I think also I have like a history, I have a degree in Latin American history, but still I felt that like I couldn't speak on these things, right? If I didn't know the complete story, I can't speak on it, right? And something that also, you know, identity politics kind of lifted up for a long time, like once I got out of college. So I think, yeah, it's just important to know that you have something to say, and you can always change that opinion, right? But you should absolutely like share your perspective, share your analysis. You don't know who's out there and needs to hear that, or also needs to see someone like themselves speaking about the revolutionary Latin American politics and really upholding like our resistance and our sovereignty and dignity. Like, I think ultimately that's what it came down to. And I think we say this, we said this in passing in conversations we've had, but like, socialism, communism, like saved my life. Like, it really did, because as alienating as this world is, especially in this moment, when you start to kind of pull kind of like remove the cobwebs from your eyes and really start to see, you know, this society and this world for what it is, it also moves you from a place of like desperation and sadness to like, well, let's fucking do something, you know? And I think that's ultimately like what it means to me. It's like it's uplifting. It's something that it speaks on so many levels, not just as a historical continuation of our third world people's resistance, and a historical continuity, but also like as a way to like engage, and really like figure out like what your principles and priorities are in life and what really matters. So I think that to me is like, yeah.
What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, I think a little bit of the same. I think anticonquista and communism and socialism for us Latin Americans in the diaspora is important because, like Ophelia was saying, that there isn't anything else out there that gives us that kind of something to help us keep sane in the extreme situation we find ourselves in. You know, for us living in the diaspora, so far away from our people, though arguably, or not arguably, but definitely in much more privilege than our people back home, but we're still, I'd say a lot of us are exiles, and we're victims of the situation. We're victims of capitalism and imperialism, and if there isn't something to help us combat capitalism, imperialism, the only other alternative is for us to, what do you call it? Just go along with this society and become part of this society and become part of the same system and the same culture and the same society that oppresses our people and people in the global south in general. So anticonquista and other diaspora and black and brown communist socialist movements are super important. They're super important for our mental health, super important for the actions that we take to help to support our people in the struggle against capitalism. And just personally being able to write for Anticonquista means that I can. It's kind of therapy. It's kind of like therapy. Being able to see the bullshit that goes on and write it down and share it with people is a kind of therapy, because it helps you kind of not keep it inside, not bottle it up inside of you, and share your experiences with people who are going through the same kind of struggles that we're going through, and who see the same bullshit that we're seeing in terms of these imperialist countries, destroying our nations and oppressing our people, subjugating us to exploitation and so on. So yeah, that's what I would say.
What about you, Nick?
Just on like socialism in Latin America, right?
Yeah.
I would say, a lot of it has understanding, what our mission is or what our goal is. And, part of that goal right now, like you mentioned earlier, is to sort of build that base to start that anti-imperialist education, put that forward specifically in the diaspora, needed, I think, the most, so that we can create those connections between people here home. And when you're talking about imperialism, which is, you know, an internet global system, the only way that you can fight it is not, you know, nation, but we've come to realize and learn that the way you fight imperialism is through solidarity and by making those international connections. And, you know, I think that's part of what we're trying to do here, and that's part of the process of what socialism. It is that you know, part of socialism is internationalism, and you know, I guess I think nowadays that's more important than it was back then, because nowadays you have more of an interconnected and interlocked capitalist system where you can't,
Mm.
you know, what we buy in the being made in 15 different countries, not only in Latin America but also in Asia and Africa. Um, and so it is by looking at, well, let's go to the source, let's go to the root. And I think that's what we're doing here at Anticonquistas. We're going back to the root of the problem. Whereas, you know, a lot of people, a lot of liberals, a lot of even progressives, they never go back to the root. They never go back to the homeland. They'll just stay in the U.S. and only talk about the U.S., which is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's problems here in the U.S. People face a lot of
Yeah.
issues, but you know, going back to the third world, you'll see that it's even harder. It's even worse.
For sure. What about you, Comrade Rich?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with, you know, and I unite with what you guys are saying. I think the work that Anticonquista is doing is extremely important. Like, you know, we're in the war of ideas, basically, right? And Anticonquista is on the front lines of that war. And, you know, believe it or not, I mean, traditional media is like newspapers and things like that. They're in decay right now, and alternate forms of media like online and websites like that have a lot of influence, especially in our young people. So, you know, a lot of opinions are formed by what people see in the media, you know. So I think what we're doing is really important work in shaping the ideas of Latin America. You know, Latin Americans. For example, where my parents are from in Colombia, being communist or being socialist is almost like being a terrorist. Like, oh my God, you know, he's a communist. It's like you're you're an ISIS or something. So, you know, I think when people see that, hey, you know, socialist, communists, we're just working class people. We just have a different worldview, and we're just like everyone else, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't drink baby blood.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
not the boogeyman.
Exactly. So we have quite a few questions already in the chat. So we have one question from Comrade Camilo. Shout out to Camilo, who has joined us on previous streams. He said, thanks for all the work you do. I was getting annoyed by remezclas. So did we. What are some of the things you all have noticed about protests in Latin America, US, Europe, and color revolutions in the last 3 years? I'll pass it on to Ophelia.
That's a great question. I mean, I think I don't want to say it's the same because I don't think that's a very good answer, but it is in a lot of ways, like regime change. The methods have changed. So whereas before you had, you know, a Pinochet or like a full-on military coup, now what you have is thousands of bots on Twitter and Facebook and or NGOs, right, that are called like Advancement for Democracy you know what I mean? Like name any combination of like that kind of NGO that is explicit purpose is to, as it often says in the US State Department or the National Endowment for Democracy, right? Like literally like the National, and was it the National Endowment for Democracy? Or yeah, it was the National Endowment for Democracy that was founded, and its guiding mission was to do what was done in secret out in the open, right? Like what was done, you know, basically like from the 30s to, I don't know, maybe like the 60s in Latin America. Well, not just Latin America, but everywhere, right? Like what was hard power or brute force is now done through more advanced and I would almost say like decentralized, like kind of, although there's a lot of still hard power stuff. Like when you look at Bolivia, like when you look at other places where there's like direct intervention. But now it's like less of the US like stepping soil on places, and it's like we're gonna foment this dissent, right? Which really, you know, if you talk to the average everyday person living in Bolivia or Nicaragua or Venezuela, they were like, we didn't want this, right? Like we wanted our progressive government, right? Like we wanted a continuation. I think that to me is the distinction, is the method which is being used, which is used to confuse people, honestly, in this era of also, as Rich mentioned, like of war of ideas. Like there's also like a flooding of information where we're oversaturated with things, so that people are like, wow, if this, you know, Nicaraguense person on Twitter is saying it, it must be true, you know? So there's a lot of like the way the ID poll has kind of melted into regime change as well. And that's all purposeful, you know? The US does this, like there's written documentation on this. They've made the paper trail a little bit harder, I would say, in terms of finding like what NGO got how much money specifically. But, you know, these are things that are done out in the open. And I think I would say like that to me has been the biggest shift. And Venezuela actually has like great pamphlets and booklets that you can literally read, where they talk about the Guarimeros, they talk about the tranques, they talk about like the strategic way, and which is why Venezuela has been, and Nicaragua has been so good at like defending the revolution, because the people are like aware of like the kind of order and process for regime change in the 21st century.
What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, I think the part of that question that I would take is, you know, what's happening in terms of protests in Europe. And the US, so for us here in the diaspora, I think what's happened recently is that although there's a lot of bullshit and confusion, as Ophelia has been saying, there's a lot of confusion because a lot of us don't understand the situation. We don't have the political education, the knowledge to kind of understand, filter out, you know, what protests are actual revolutionary protests and what protests are bullshit right-wing color revolution type protests. And I think what's happening now, and I think partly because of the Black Lives Matter movement and partly because of COVID, we're starting to see people kind of understand that there's a fucked up situation. Neoliberalism in these countries are a form of violence. And so I think Black Lives Matter has kind of triggered that kind of, actually, hold on, because this has been going on for so long, but we're only just kind of, it's becoming viral because of social media and blogs and so on. And so I think that's kind of triggered a thinking in a lot of us, Black and brown people in the diaspora, to kind of hone in on what's on the violence that neoliberalism inflicts on us every day. So I think it isn't a given that we're going to turn to socialism and communism. I think that's the work that people like us, and not just us, but every Black and brown diaspora, communist, socialist out there, to kind of push our communities to look into Marxism, Leninism, for us Latin Americans to look into Mariátegui, Jose Carlos Mariátegui, and his writing, and understand that capitalism and you know, its more recent form in terms of, you know, neoliberalism is a form of violence against our people, and is a worse kind of violence than any violence that, you know, that they show us on the mainstream media.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Nick? What do you think? Things going on, protests in Latin America, US, Europe, and color revolutions in the last 3 years?
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing now is this sort of a solidarity in the anti-police protests all throughout the world. And I forget what it was, whether it was Nigeria or Kenya recently that had anti-police protests.
Nigeria, yeah.
In Latin America, we're seeing them all over, you know, in Colombia, yeah, Nigeria. and so yeah, you know, what we're seeing is really a massive wave. And I think when we talk about anti-police protests, what we're really talking about is state repression, oftentimes for economic reasons, you know, repression of workers, union leaders, campesinos, you know, peasants, whatever it may be. In terms of, you know, comparing it to like 3 years ago, I think I agree a lot with what Ophelia said. A lot of it now is moved onto the digital media, digital platforming, especially like social media. I think one of the most dangerous platforms right now in terms of imperialism is Facebook, because Facebook is becoming extremely popular in the global south. You know, it has like something crazy like 2 billion users or something nuts like that. So the, you know, power that one could have on Facebook if you have a big enough platform is tremendous. And that's
Check out
what
Nick's article.
imperialists are going for when they're doing these color
It's really
revolutions
good.
nowadays. Yeah. I recently did an article about a leak that was done about Facebook and how they basically help out with these
Crazy.
imperialist revolution and color revolution. But yeah, this is what they're doing now, and I think that's going to become more popular. And it's true too about the whole identity politics. You know, you see what ends up happening is a lot of people who have good intentions who want to help, you know, certain countries in Latin America. They follow this sort of like liberal identity politics way of thinking, and they see, okay, well, you know, there's a student protest in Nicaragua. That must mean, you know, there's a revolution, a socialist revolution happening. You know, in reality, it's right wing, you know, reactionaries, not even being posing as students, you know, trying to overthrow and destroy what was achieved by Ortega. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's stuff like that that's being done.
What about you, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, not surprisingly, because of the pandemic, is that you see a lot more working class people participating in these protests. You know, traditionally, people are at work or students are in school and they don't come out and protest like we've seen in recent months, you know, especially people of color or so-called people of color. They're out there, you know, participating in protests. So I think that's one of the big differences that I noticed compared to the protests of the past. And is the trend in the world right now. I mean, that's the wave right now, and the rest of the world is. I mean, I've seen little white towns where people were organizing protests, or something that was unheard of years ago, right? So I think you know, you see a lot more working class people of color participating in the protests, and that's a great thing. Yeah.
So we have a great question from Comrade Orlando. I'm going to open it up. Whoever wants to answer it first. Thoughts on the label Latinx? That's something that we constantly, I think that's since we launched 3 years ago, that's something that people have asked us a lot or commented on. So anybody want to take a stab at that first?
I would quickly say that I think it's understandable. It's an understandable idea. I think it's just the problem with it is that it's very kind of academic, middle class, and diaspora kind of that we focus too much on it. We focus too much on that label, and now I think that they're changing it to it's not Latinx anymore. I think it's I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but with an E at the end instead of an X. And I think it's important. I think you know, obviously us as Anticonquista, we're, you know, anti-machismo and anti-sexism and anti-patriarchy, and we understand the kind of thinking behind it, because we do want to kind of destroy those imposed labels. But what I would say is that we can't focus purely on that. And I think in the diaspora, for our people, we tend to focus on, you know, it's basically part of identity politics. So we focus on identity, we focus on labels, and we miss kind of the socioeconomic, the political, the social stuff. And yeah, it's. I would say I'm not against it. I'm not against it. I just think, and also the other thing I would say is that working class Latin Americans don't give a damn about that label. They don't. So I would say, like, so what do we need to do as socialists and communists and activists is focus on on the urgent kind of situation that the majority of the working class Latin American people need. And I don't think that focusing, but we're not against that. I don't think we are against using the term Latinx, but I think focusing on purely like that label is inconsequential, I think.
Yeah, anyone else want to comment on that? Latinx?
Yeah, I mean, this is my own personal opinion, not the views of Anticonquista, but like I don't use it. I don't even know what the hell it was. I mean, I'm from the old school. I didn't even know how to pronounce it, and I just think the word Latino is already fucked up. You know, it's like we don't have to correct it by making it gender neutral. Like it's, you know, we should come up with a new word. That the word Latino doesn't represent me. So why would we try to correct it?
The other thing I've been wondering recently is like, what's wrong with Latin? Just Latin.
Oh, what's wrong with Latin? I mean,
like, what's wrong with just using Latin when Latin is gender neutral?
Oh yeah,
right.
Why do we have to add it next to it?
I don't know. But I think if we were gonna come up with a word to describe us as a people, we could use words from indigenous languages that are already gender neutral, or African language, but just to correct, like the word Latino, I have a problem with.
Yeah.
So Latinx is like, why would we try to correct that when that's not the issue? Yeah,
it's definitely like bourgeois academia. That's where it comes from. That's where it originates, right? Like, as someone, I have a minor in Latino studies, you know, it's like, and then it was at that point when I was in college, it was the arroba, right? Like the at, you know, like that was more popular, and then the X, and now I guess we're moving on to E, and it's it's exactly like what we're talking about. Like, we're also like, we're not nationalists, you know, even though we're all like, yeah, our family's from here, because objectively, like, that's what people understand. Like, we also like want to push back against like this idea of like these artificial borders and boundaries placed upon our people and third world peoples overall, to say, you know, I think it has a lot of those. I think there's a lot of good things that are associated with Latinx, right? Like being more encompassing and just more forward with like gender and sexuality, which as any good communist should be anyway, you know? So I think there's like a lot of redundancy, I feel personally, but it's just like, it's alienating, it's confusing, right? I think there was a Pew poll recently that said like less than 5% of people actually understand, in the US at least, like what Latinx is, right? So I think that like, it's not like what the masses are using, right? It's not approachable. And like, I completely agree with what Comrade Rich is saying, is like Latino to begin with is already a kind of shit word. So let's just create something else, right? Like, why try to patch up what doesn't really work? So, but it's like, to me, it's the same thing as like, I don't know, like also other things that are like labels. I feel like you can honestly like use whatever you want at this point. If we're both agreeing on the same end goal and putting in the same work, then fuck it, I'll call you Latinx if you want. You know, like to me, it's not that big of a deal. Because for some people, they get real upset about it. Like,
how dare you?
Like, oh my God, why do I have, you know, like, I think that's wrong. Like, I do think that's wrong. I'm like, why are you getting yourself so worked up about it, right? Like, you know, but I mean, within the left, right? Like, other people on the left are like, I'm absolutely not going to do that. I'm just like, oh, dude, like, all right. So I think it's like, yeah, like Carlos was saying, like, I'm unfazed, but yeah, I understand the intent, right? But like the reality of like how people are using it is, yeah.
What do you think, Nick?
Okay, go on, Nick.
Yeah, you know, for me, I was thinking, it really, as a Marxist, all I really care about is material conditions.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, how can we best communicate to the people? If it doesn't help us communicate to the people, and it either turns them off or just makes us not interesting, then, or people just aren't using the term and they don't even know what the hell it means, then why am I going to use it? If part of this is to educate and to organize the masses, why am I going to talk in ways that they don't understand, unless I'm
Yeah.
specifically, speaking to a group who understands what I'm saying? So,
Right.
I don't know why. I don't have any problem with it. If someone says, I want to be called Latinx or whatever, that's fine with me. That's cool. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to use it when I'm talking to people who don't use the term. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Did you want to add something, Carlos?
Yeah, the other little thing that I would add is that here in the UK, I'm sure it's similar in the US. The way it's kind of like an aesthetic kind of thing, with like groups that are coming up, and they're trying to be like, it's kind of like about inclusion. Like, we want to be recognized by British or US mainstream society, and so we want to push this label to recognize us as Latinx, and yeah, so it just goes back to like identity politics, and it's kind of very empty of a material analysis of what our people go through.
So we have another great question from Comrade Luca. This one's really interesting. Do you have any advice on how to interact with self-exiled anti-communist Venezuelans, Cubans, etc. in the U.S. when organizing? I'll just quickly comment it, and then I'll ask if any other comrades want to comment on it. I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that although we are Latin American and Caribbean communists and we are trying to organize our diaspora, there is also a class division. And I think some populations won't be won over because of their material conditions. Like, for example, in Miami, you have these right-wing Cubans, right-wing Venezuelans, right-wing Nicaraguans who left their countries after the revolutions or progressive processes that began to implement socialism. And materially, they were part of the class that was a slave-owning class. They tend to be white people, criollos, people who are more directly descended from the conquistadores. And so I think we also have to draw a line within our diaspora, within our people, to be like, yeah, we're not trying to get everybody, like we're trying to get most of our people. We're trying to get the majority of our people. But yeah, there are going to be pockets of people that aren't going to join us because materially they're not going to be won over. And that's one debate I have with a lot of first worldist communists who still believe that there is equal revolutionary potential in the US as everywhere in the world. It's like, dude, you're not going to win over a lot of those gusanos in Miami, or Venezuelan escualidos in Miami who have country club sponsorships, who have nice houses, who have money, who are getting that US money. They don't have a material interest in bringing about socialism and communism. So why the fuck should I talk to them in the first place? And that's not to say that they don't, that every one of them is like that, because in fact, there's actually some younger generation Cubans in Miami who are like the grandkids of the gusanos who came after the revolution, who are more progressive minded. They may not be fully like communists, but they're more progressive minded. And so there's some room to organize with them. But I think, in terms of interacting with these gusanos, with these counter-revolutionaries, I think A is going in with the idea that, yeah, I'm probably not going to win them over because materially they benefit from capitalism and imperialism. So there's no point in interacting. But if I do have to interact with them, I'm going to dispel the rumor, this false idea that socialism has never worked. It does work. And that's the reason. And it works because you can point out tangibly, materially, economically, the successes that have happened in Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, etc. And so I think it's an interesting kind of thing to really grapple with. But I don't know if any other comrades want to comment on that.
I mean, again, it's a class question, and they don't belong to the class we're trying to organize anyway. So, yeah, how to interact with them? Don't. You're not trying to win.
I was looking for someone else to say that. I was like, I don't want to be the one that was like, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to win them. So
yeah.
But I would say I would add that if they are bougie Latin Americans who are open-minded, who are willing to listen to you, then talk to them. But if you see that they, like Rich says, if they're not listening and they're just arguing and they're obviously defending their class interest, then it's pointless. But if they are open-minded and they're willing to listen to our arguments and talk to them.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I mean, well, specifically they asked like anti-communist, right? Like, so there's already like a characteristic about this group of people that you're asking about, that it's very evident. You got to know your enemy also, right? Like it's just not strategic, right? To go around and waste your energy on people, just want to rile you up and nothing's going to come of your effort when you can be either speaking to folks who are more open-minded or other folks in like the working class, right? Who have good instincts, may not have had the same access to the same things that you do, who just need a little more development in terms of like their political perspective or lens. And that's where your energy is best placed. And it's hard because you're on social media and it's triggering, like someone will post something and you're like, you get pissed because you're like, you're wrong, but then you got to like kind of pull it back and be like, is this worth it? Right? Is this going to produce or, get us someplace better? And usually the answer is no.
I figured the answer's in the question. It says self-exiled. If they're self-exiled, it's because they're not about, lefty socialist revolution. So it's kind of pointless to talk to them, to be honest.
And don't worry about them. There's more of us than them. Like they just seem like louder because they have more means, they have more capital. Like it's like Rich said, it's class, they have, and Nick mentioned earlier too, like, and they often can be louder because who can show up to a protest midday at an embassy, like a lot of the times you'll see like the anti-Bolivarian Venezuelans, and I'm like, who are you white looking people here midday? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, put two and two together and you start to figure out like who these people really are. And were you in your home country, they would fucking treat you like shit, like they don't look at you as an equal. I went to school with a lot of really bougie Latin Americans, and I was like, well, one, they're not, in my eyes, they're the ruling class, right, within the country. They're the national bourgeoisie, right? Like they don't give a shit about your parents who are campesinos or like mid-level workers or like bureaucrats or whatever. Like they don't see you as equals. In fact, they sell your family out. They sell your parents out, right, to make a dime or whatever.
What do you think? There are class enemies.
Yeah.
I bet what they're gonna do is agree with you as a kind of like, oh, that's cute, like like a, oh, that's interesting, but they're not gonna try and join us or try and help us because it's going to go directly against the material interests.
Exactly. What do you think, Nick? Organizing with working with self-exiled anti-communist Venezuelans, Cubans, etc.
When I was in college, I was with the group, the Chiapa Support Committee, and we were inviting and we were doing study sessions on Cuba and Venezuela, just thinking about the conditions there and what socialism looks like there. So these were public events held on campus, and so we would always get a lot of Cubans, white Cubans from Miami. Towards my last 2 years, as things started ramping up on Venezuela, we were getting more Venezuelan students, right-wing students. And I would have to interact with these people a lot, and oftentimes they would come to our meetings solely to disrupt them and just to like make criticisms to argue with us. And so what I would often do is they would talk, what they would do is they'd bring up anecdotal evidence. They'd talk about their families. My family, one guy told me, his mother was crying when Hugo Chavez and he got back on TV. He was saved after the 2002 coup, and his mother was in tears and she had to leave the country and all this stuff. And then he went on to tell me that, at least here in the US, there's no political prisoners like in Venezuela. And, I'm, as a Puerto Rican, as someone who got to see Oscar Lopez get released from jail, I was just like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Like, this is the most bullshit I've ever heard. Like, political prisoners in the U.S., man. And what I try
Literally
to
the
do
largest
is I try
prison
to be
system
like,
in the
okay, like
world.
I understand. Yeah, for real. And I'm just like, I try to be like, look, I understand, I hear you, I get what you're saying, but compare that to Colombia, right? So a lot of them bring up the migration issue in Venezuela. Millions of Venezuelans have left because of the economic issue. Okay, well, compare that to Colombia right now. You have 5 million domestic migrants, right? You have people dying every week from the government, right? Not from paramilitaries. You don't have any of the social programs that exist in Venezuela. It's it's simple things like I don't try to deny these people their stories. Like sure, like I'm sure your mom felt awful about Hugo. I'm sure your dad hates Fidel Castro. Fantastic, but like that doesn't have anything to do with what actually happened on the ground in the country. Your personal
Yeah.
experience isn't the experience of 10 million other people. So I just think, yeah, at some point, I don't even try to convince them. I just try to get them to see that, like, because a lot of them have this glorified view of the U.S. Like it's like this perfect, great state. And I think that's just because they're bourgeois from their country. Um, so I just try to contradict that. I try to combat that.
Yeah.
So we have another interesting question. Shout out again to everybody in the chat who's listening again. We're Anticonquista is the 5 co-editors of Anticonquista. We're an anti-imperialist media collective produced by and for the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. This is our 3rd anniversary, our 3rd birthday, and we're celebrating this with y'all, answering any questions. If you have any we have probably about 10 more minutes left, but we have an interesting question from Skeptical Mantis. What do you guys think of New Africa and the 5-state solution? It's an idea of taking over the U.S. South for an independent Black state. I think me personally, I don't know much about that. And I feel like as a non-Black person, it's not my place to be like, this is the correct or not correct. But what I will say is I do support the dissolution of the United States. I believe the United States is a settler colonial government that does not deserve to exist. In my opinion, I don't think there's any room for a U.S. flag, U.S. government. I think that Indigenous and Black people should have autonomous self-determination over their lands. And so if there are people supporting New Africa and an independent Black state, I definitely support that. I don't know what you all think.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for it, but we have to remember we're on stolen land. That land belongs to the indigenous people. So if we're going to establish a Black state on stolen land, you got to have input from the people it belongs to. So if it involves indigenous people, and then I'm all for it. But let's not forget that.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else, Nick, or anyone else?
I support the idea. I remember that's the thing about that a long time ago in CP writings. They talked about establishing a new nation, a new Black nation state, specifically in the South. But I think besides that, outside of that question, I think it's also important to note that right now in the U.S., I think we're fighting a nationalist struggle. I don't think we're fighting a socialist struggle in the U.S. because of the settler colonial status of the nation. It's not, you can't establish socialism in a nation where you have a nation one that's not united and with a bunch of different ethnicities and races and different communities, which all claim to have a different sort of culture. I don't see it as a lot of I see a lot of nationalist struggles in the U.S., including the black in struggle. On top of indigenous struggles and even Latino struggles here in the U.S., trying to break away from the United States. So I support it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on that? So we have one last question because I know we're running out of time, and shout out again to everybody who's watching and listening. Thank you for joining us on our 3rd birthday anniversary for Anticonquista.
Don't forget to sign up on Patreon, win some
right.
stuff. It's pinned in the chat. We'll also post some stuff on social media about it, but you could get a little green book and some dope patches.
So we have one last question. I think this is a great question to wrap us up here from Anthony Sid Aguirre. How does Anticonquista wish to situate itself in the greater international anti-imperialist struggle that is on the rise currently? Do y'all have bigger plans for this platform, i.e. offline organizing? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
That's a hard question. I think that's what we're doing constantly, assessing and reassessing where we're at and where we need to rectify. And we, like Rich mentioned, we started as a party. We saw that was like difficult to maintain. We were like, what are we doing well? Let's hone that. So we went back to just doing media. Obviously, we still have our fund the resistance and our principle of not taking any of the funds that we get, except for our very minimal overhead, which is like our website, our podcast hosting, little things like that, functionally we just need to pay for. But other than that, we have sent every penny back to different groups in Latin America. And we were literally just talking about figuring out how we can either do solidarity trips or do more concrete work on the ground with groups in Latin America. Not that we're not already doing that by giving funds, right? But we're not physically there doing that, in terms of offline organizing, like you mentioned, Anthony. So I think, I think as we're continuing to build Anticonquista and also figuring out what we can take on, you see us, we're 5 human beings, with families and kids and, parents and lives. And I think that's, we're hard on ourselves, I would say, as in we should be doing more. But I think we're getting to a good point where we're trying to see where we can do more offline stuff. I mean, there isn't anything concrete, I will say, for us yet in the books. But obviously, I think we always had that vision in mind. And we're flexible about how we do that exactly. We don't have the answers, honestly. I think a lot of people are like, how did you set up AC? I'm like, we're honestly still figuring it out as we go,
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say that, I think, as you guys have already said, when we started Anticonquista, we also tried to start a party, a communist party for the Latin American diaspora, and it was very difficult. And it's difficult because the situation is that we live in the imperial core, as the third worldists would say, and as authors and academics like Zach Cope and so on would say, and what that does is that it makes it difficult to organize in these countries because there's the oppression that we face isn't as blatant as what it is in the global south, in the homeland. It's not as direct, although it can be as well, obviously. So it makes it difficult. So I think the kind of compromise that we've made is a good compromise, which is, all right, so what can we do? And in terms of concrete material things that we can do to help the struggle, to help the anti-imperialist struggle. And that is what we're already doing, which is providing financial, material support for revolutionary groups in the global south, in Latin America specifically, and the Caribbean. So I think that is what we're doing. Concrete offline organizing is what we do as Anticonquista, is collecting funds that go directly to the struggle of our people back home, and it goes a long way. The currencies where we are, the pound sterling where I am and the dollar where you guys are, is a strong currency, and the money that we collect goes a long way when we send it back home. So I would suggest, that is kind of the central thing that we're going for, and that is what I would suggest that people would. That's why I suggest that people should help us with. Donate to us so that we can send that money to the struggle back home.
Anyone else, Rich or Nick?
I think you guys said it all.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Oh yeah.
What were you gonna say, Nick?
Yeah. I would just say. Yeah, my bad. This lag is me up, man. But I was gonna say that the I don't think we give ourselves for the offline organizing. I think when there's first I would say whenever what I notice is that there's a lot of whenever there's an attack on Latin America, we often we often do a lot to work with organizations or anti-war organizations here in the first world, what they're mostly are, to get out on the streets and actually be active in the protests and stuff. And so it would be nice if one day we could make our own one of those, or we could be more involved in that. But like everyone said, it takes time. And I think what Carlos said is also really important. The in terms of economics, the money, the power that is just in our currency by itself is significant and that is important, and that can't be, I think, undervalued, especially when it goes back to the diaspora.
Yeah,
that makes me think of there's something when we talk about the Cuban Revolution, right? Like La Habana and the city workers like amassed tons of funds for the guerrillas, right? Like, and so I think that's kind of like part of the history that everyone has like a role to play, right? And to I'm like losing it, to each
from each according to their ability, to each according to
their means. So, and that's honestly, that's in our bylaws. Like that's in our mission, right? Like that's like, what we know we can do for now and where we are, should that change, then our methods would change, So I think that's part of it too. Yeah. Like just doing as much as we can from here. And also as third worldists, we have different guiding principles, I think, than other groups in the first world. So we don't really see value in printing tons of posters and, banners and going out and doing what I call performance art, in a street in downtown LA where, there's, I feel very little tangible results. But, even amongst ourselves, we don't agree on everything, So, but I think that's part of one of our kind of.
Yeah, I think like Ofelia was saying, like understanding our role and also what Carlos was alluding to in the Imperial Core. It's like, if I always joke around with Ofelia, if I were to go out into a revolutionary situation in like the mountains, I would be dead in like 15 minutes. I'm gonna be straight up with y'all. I will get mosquito bites. I would be like, yo, what the fuck is going on? But what am I good at? I'm good at, I like, writing. I like designing shit. I like, doing this, talking. And that's part of it. And I think that people, especially in the first world, a lot of leftists are obsessed with like being like the lone, revolutionary with like the AK, and they're like, and it's like, not everybody is going to be like that. There's people peeling potatoes. Everybody has their role. And I think even with Ernesto Che Guevara, during the Cuban Revolution, like we see that, there was moments where, he was like, I want to be on the front lines. I want to be fighting. And eventually in conversations with Fidel's like, yo, you're a doctor. Like you're a trained doctor. We need you to be helping people. And at first, if you read Che Guevara's diaries, he's like, at first it was kind of like frustrating because I wanted to be in the front lines fighting Batista soldiers. But I came to understand that like in a revolution, you're best suited for like what you're passionate about, what your skill set is. And I think that's exactly what we're doing now. All of us are college educated. We have skills, we have media skills, communication skills. We're all doing stuff. And I think that in terms of like longer term building and organizing, that's something we have to keep in mind, is that like our praxis is not going to look the same everywhere, and the same way that in the Cuban Revolution, the cities, the urban areas were underground and were financing movement for the guerrillas. If we apply that with the third worldist analysis to the the global countryside, the global South, and the global city, which is like, you know, the US, the UK, Europe, you know, we can apply that on a broader scale. And so I think that's where us as Anticonquista are on the cutting edge of communist theory, where we're not just saying, you know, let's have a rally and spend $2,000 on a Hands Off Venezuela banner. We're saying, yo, let's send that money back directly to people who like actually need it and can use it. And so it's just constantly self-evaluating and just being real with yourself to be like, yo, what can I do? What can I do? Not do? And so I think that was a good question. But before we wrap up, any comrades want to give any final comments or anything before we head out?
Yeah, just on that last point, I wanted to say, you know, that we, as a diaspora, I think it's time, like, you know, it's 2020, it's time for us to kind of develop our struggle. And, you know, for a long time, our, you know, my parents are activists, and there's a lot of socialists and just general lefty activists here in the UK, and they very often, and you know, that's awesome that they do it, that they go to an embassy or to a square to protest what's happening back home, but we need to move beyond that now. Like we have the power of social media, we have the power to collect funds, and I think, as Ophelia said, a lot of it is performative, especially with younger generation Latin Americans in the diaspora. A lot of it's performative. They want the aesthetic of the protester who goes to every protest outside an embassy. Here in the UK, here in London, we go to the Colombian embassy on a weekend when the people at the embassy aren't even working that day. So we go and protest outside in an empty embassy, and we think that that's gonna do anything. And I think it's actually easier and more effective to stay at home and try and convince people to send funds back home directly to the people who are on the front line against, you know, these capitalists and these capitalist and neo-colonial governments in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Well said, man. And again, I think that's going to do it for us. Shout out to everybody who's on here. Shout out to Fred Hampton's Ghost, Skeptical Mantis, Edith Machuca. Shout out to Carlos, Rich, Nick, Ophelia, Anticonquista, everybody who supports us. Thanks again. Make sure to go to anticonquista.com. Sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/Anticonquista. Get copies of this book, get copies of the beautiful patches that Comrade Rich designed for us that are beautiful.
Even if you're just given $1, you know, you'll be both in the US and in the UK. Like, we're gonna raffle off tons of stuff. So yeah, sign up on our Patreon, throw us $1.
Peace out, comrades. It was a really great conversation, and hopefully I'm hoping we can do another one of these at the end of the year to maybe recap 2020, talk about some of the politics. I think it's a good format. And so shout out to everybody. Peace out, y'all. Hasta la victoria siempre. Peace. Enjoy your Sunday.
Peace, comrades.
Peace out, comrades.
Peace.